They found him beneath the nursery window. Rain clung to his fur like grief that wouldn't let go, and the baby monitor beside him crackled softly, as if echoing a promise only he could hear. This story isn't just about loyalty. It's about what happens when the world forgets. But a dog remembers. The kind of memory that doesn't speak. It stays. It waits. It watches. This one will stay with you. Like, share, and tell us where in the world you are watching from today. I don't know what time it was when I first saw him. The baby monitor had gone silent hours before, but something told me to check it anyway. Not the screen, not the buttons, just the sound. The raw, static-filled hum that usually meant the baby was stirring, or the neighbor's Wi-Fi was interfering again. But tonight, there was a different rhythm, a low, steady sound. Not breathing, not footsteps. Something older, more patient. I pressed my ear to the receiver and held my breath. Then I heard it, a thud, gentle, regular, like a body shifting against soaked wood. Then, a whimper. Not human, not scared, either. Just tired. By the time I reached the window, the rain had already soaked through the outside pane, turning the glass into a blur of city light reflections. But through it, just beyond the back porch, I could make out the faint outline of him, a German shepherd, massive, still curled beside the baby monitor I had accidentally left outside during yesterday's chaotic rush. He didn't bark, didn't lift his head. He just sat, facing the baby's room. I don't know why I didn't call animal control right then. Maybe it was the way his ears twitched with the monitor's faint crackle. Or maybe it was the way he looked, not lost, not wild, but waiting. Like he knew exactly where he was supposed to be. I went outside with an umbrella and a towel. Not because I planned to approach him. I didn't even know if he was aggressive. But something about the way his fur clung to his ribs, the dried mud around his legs, the matted patch near his neck didn't read like a stray. It read like someone who had come through fire just to get here. I crouched low, didn't say a word. He didn't move. The rain softened. The night pressed close around us, and then from the nursery window above, the monitor gave one last soft crackle and fell silent. That's when the dog stood, not to leave, not to run. He walked to the foot of the back steps, lay down facing the nursery wall, and stayed. The baby stirred just before dawn. Not with a cry, just a half-coo, half-sigh sound that told me sleep had reached its thinnest edge. I stood just outside her door and listened. She didn't call out, didn't cry, but the moment her fingers brushed the blanket, the dog outside lifted his head, as if he heard it, as if she had called him. I didn't sleep that night, just sat at the kitchen table with the curtain half parted, watching this dog soaked, unmoving, alert. A sentinel. The monitor was dead. No power. But he didn't seem to care. He watched the room. He watched her. Not once did he look at me. By mid-morning, I tried to approach him again, stepped outside with some chicken breast and a bowl of water. I expected growling, or flight. He didn't budge. But when I placed the bowl near the park's edge, he sniffed it once, and then looked up at the nursery window. Not me, the baby. She'd been watching him too, her little hands gripping the side of the crib, her eyes wide and blinking in slow wonder. She pressed one palm against the glass, and so did he, not with a paw, just his gaze. That moment didn't need words. It felt like something ancient had passed between them, something no adult could quite understand. By noon, I gave up trying to call the shelter. Something in me, something I hadn't trusted in years, said, not yet. The rain had stopped, but he stayed. That night, I brought the monitor back inside, set it on the nightstand like always, checked the batteries, listened. It was silent, and yet, I heard it anyway. That same breath, that soft whimper, the stillness of something watching. I knew he was still there, and for the first time in a long time, I slept. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because someone else was watching over her now, and I believed it. The morning after, I found myself reaching for the curtain before I even checked on the baby. I should have gone to her crib first. That was the routine. Every morning since she was born, wake, listen, crib. But something shifted the moment that dog curled beside the back steps. I wasn't sure if it was comfort or curiosity guiding me now, but I knew my first glance had to go to the porch. He was still there, not sleeping, not pacing, just there, a massive shape folded into himself, head lifted, ears pricked, waiting. The sun was low, but warm, brushing the railing in gold. It caught the edge of his fur, making the water droplets along his spine shimmer like frost, thawing into spring. I opened the back door slowly this time, not to test him, not to bait him, just to see. He didn't flinch, didn't growl, but his eyes flicked up just once, then settled back on the window. The baby had stirred. I could hear her through the wall. Just the soft hiccup of a yawn. And I swear to you, the dog exhaled with her, like they were breathing on the same rhythm. I brought more food, this time placing it a little closer. Warmed chicken, a handful of rice, some boiled carrots I had left from dinner. Not exactly gourmet, but I didn't know how else to say. I see you. You can stay. He sniffed it again, cautiously, ate slowly. Nothing greedy in the way he moved, was just deliberate, careful. I sat down on the porch steps, wrapping my sweater tighter. There was still a chill in the planks from the rain. The baby monitor, newly charged, sat beside me, but I barely glanced at it. I didn't need it anymore. I had him. He looked at me just once, a real look this time, not a flicker. Deep brown eyes, rimmed with age and wear. A quiet wisdom. I know people overuse that phrase when they talk about animals, but it fits here. He looked like he'd seen things, and that he'd come a long way to forget them. That's when I noticed his neck. He had the markings of a collar, the faint compressed fur around the base of his throat, but no actual strap, no tags, no name. I reached slowly for the small knot of mud beneath his ear, thinking maybe there was something tangled in the fur. But before I got close, he shifted back, gently, not with fear, just boundaries, and I respected it. He wasn't ready yet, but I was ready to learn who he'd been, and why of all places he'd chosen this porch. I made calls later that afternoon. Not to the shelter, not yet, but to the vet's office, 2 towns over, the one I used to visit when we still had Milo, our old retriever. The receptionist remembered me. Said I could bring the dog in, no charge, if he let me. They could check for a chip. If, I repeated, because that was the question now. Would he ever let me close enough? I didn't push it. Instead, I sat with him, for hours that week. A chair beside the steps, an old fleece blanket laid out near his spot, fresh bowls of food and water twice a day. Not once did I force affection. Not once did I call him. I didn't even give him a name. He had one already. He just hadn't told me about it yet. The baby noticed him too, more and more each day. She'd scoot to the edge of her crib when I held her near the window, chubby hands patting the glass, blue eyes wide and still. Sometimes she'd smile. Sometimes she'd just watch, mirroring the dog's stillness, and he'd watch her right back. They shared something, not language, not gestures, but presence. And in that presence, I saw something I hadn't known I was missing. My husband used to say grief was a noise no one else could hear, that after he passed, it would stay in the corners like radio static, only I'd notice when the room buzzed with it. He was right. The house had been so loud in his absence, not with sound, but with loss. The kind that hides behind grocery lists and nursery mobiles. The kind that settles into baby monitors and half-finished lullabies. But when that dog came, the noise changed. It didn't vanish, but it softened. He didn't just take his place on the porch, he absorbed the ache, and in some strange way, he gave it shape. By the 5th day, I noticed something odd. The baby had stopped waking in the middle of the night. No cries, no WHIMPERS, just deep, even breaths. Like she knew someone was keeping watch. One evening, I peeked in with the monitor held against my chest, half expecting it to buzz again with that strange low hum I'd first heard, but it was quiet. The only sound came from outside, the faint rhythm of a tail brushing the floorboards. I stepped out and found him there, upright, head lifted toward the window like always. But this time, he looked at me first, and when I stepped closer, he didn't move. I reached down gently this time, touched the place where his collar should have been, and I felt it. A tiny bump, metal, beneath the skin, a microchip. I made an appointment for the next morning, but something in me already knew, even before the scan, before the name on the file, this wasn't the kind of dog that got lost. This was the kind of dog that left, or maybe run, from what I didn't know, but I was about to find out, and somehow I already feared what I'd learn. The veterinary office sat on the edge of the highway, tucked between a faded feed store and a gas station with a blinking open sign that rarely turned off. It had always looked out of place there, all soft blue paint and white trim windows, like a leftover piece of a small town no one remembered. I had strapped the baby into her carrier and left it in the back seat, knowing we wouldn't be inside for long. The nurse on the phone had promised a quick scan, no fuss. If he lets you bring him in, that alone tells me something, she had said with a quiet smile in her voice. But I hadn't brought him in. He had come on his own. He climbed into the back seat the moment I opened the door. No leash, no prompting, just a quiet, tired willingness, as if he'd done this before, as if somewhere in the folds of his memory, he knew the motions, and yet, something in me ached at that, like I was bringing him somewhere he didn't want to go, even if he accepted it. Inside, the lights were too bright, the antiseptic air is too clean. He hesitated at the threshold, his paws pressing into the worn floor as the automatic door slid open. A shiver passed through him, not exactly fear, something more reluctant. Resigned, the vet tech greeted us softly. No sudden moves, no questions. She led us to a quiet exam room with ocean gray walls and a metal table neither of us would use. She let him stay on the floor. She knelt, held the scanner, and paused. "Do you mind?" she asked, looking at me. I didn't answer. I just knelt beside him and pressed a hand to his shoulder. He leaned into it, just slightly. The scanner beeped. Then, again. She looked at the screen. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes did. Something settled in them, like recognition, wrapped in caution. "Hold on," she said gently. "Just wait here." She returned with the vet, a tall man with silver at his temples and a wedding ring so worn it seemed part of his hand. He didn't speak at first, just looked at the dog, then at me. "His name," he said slowly, "is Rook." The sound of it hit me like a dropped glass. Rook. It didn't sound like a pet's name, it sounded like a soldier's, or a promise. He was registered to a woman named Leah Camden, the vet continued. Address was about 40 miles from here. Rural property. Fire-damaged. That last phrase stopped everything in my chest. Fire-damaged. I didn't say anything. Just let the words sit in the room like a bruise. The vet hesitated before continuing. We scanned him back in January. Someone brought him in and said he'd been circling the edge of their property for days, covered in soot. Mild burns along the back legs. But he wouldn't stay anywhere. By the time we filed the report, he was gone again. "And Leah?" I asked, already knowing the answer in the pit of my stomach. He nodded. "Past house fire. Electrical. She didn't make it out." I closed my eyes. The weight of it settled in the room like dust. No wonder he had that look. That quiet, watching look. He hadn't been abandoned. He'd been left behind. And somehow, he'd kept searching for warmth, for breath, for the sound of a heartbeat that no longer existed, until he found us back in the car. I didn't drive. just sat in the parking lot, the baby sleeping in her seat, her soft breaths fogging the window in slow rhythm. Rook, no longer the dog, no longer unknown, sat beside me on the passenger side. His body curved toward the back, watching the baby. That name suited him. Strong, still, slightly sad, like a piece meant to protect something smaller. I reached out and ran my hand along the ridge of his neck. This time, he didn't pull away, not even a flicker. He just let me touch the place where her voice used to call him. The days that followed blurred together like rain on glass. I didn't talk to anyone about it, not the vet, not the neighbors, not even my sister, who kept leaving messages about getting back to normal and finding a routine again. I didn't want a routine. I wanted whatever this was. Rook remained on the porch, but sometimes he'd circle the house, especially near sunset. I'd watch him from the kitchen window as he paused near the old mailbox, nose lifting toward the horizon. Maybe he was still listening to her. Maybe he always would be. But every night, without fail, he returned to his post outside the nursery, and every morning, the baby would wake calm, rested, her tiny hands outstretched toward the light. She didn't speak, of course, not yet, but I began to think that if she did, her first word wouldn't be mama, or ball, or book. It would be him. One afternoon, I placed an old comforter on the porch and sat beside Rook with the baby in my arms. She wiggled and reached for him, not afraid, not uncertain, just full of that soft, fearless wonder only babies seem to possess. He didn't move, but his eyes followed. Her hand, she touched his paw, and I watched him exhale. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a movie moment, but something shifted in that breath, something like a release, or maybe return later that week. I found myself holding Leah Camden's name in my hands. I had gone searching through local reports, archived news pages, even a faded obituary posted in a church bulletin board online. It had no picture. Just a line, Leah Mae Camden, beloved by her animals, and quiet to the end. No surviving family listed, just a name, and a dog who wouldn't stop looking for her that night. I stood by the crib longer than usual. The baby had fallen asleep, clutching the edge of her blanket, lips parted, lashes fluttering slightly with dreams I'd never be able to enter. Rook lay just beyond the window, watching, always watching. I placed the monitor back on the nightstand and turned off the lamp. And as I turned to leave, I whispered the name to the room, not to the baby, not to the house, to him. Good night. Rook, he didn't respond, but in the silence that followed, the monitor crackled once faint, like breath catching on memory, and I smiled, because I knew he'd heard me. I didn't expect him to come inside. Rook had made it clear silently, firmly, that his place was outside, not banished, not afraid, just chosen. He wasn't a house dog anymore. He was something else now. A watcher, a guardian, a sentinel beneath the nursery window. But that morning, I left the screen door unlatched anyway, not as an invitation, more like a quiet gesture, a bridge, if he ever needed it. The air was colder than it had been in days, one of those early spring mornings, where the sunlight lies about the warmth. It shimmered through the kitchen windows like butter, but the floorboards, under my bare feet, still held the memory of winter. Rook lay where he always did, head on his paws, eyes half-lidded, but alert. The baby, just changed and fed, was babbling in the blanket nest I'd made on the floor. I'd laid her down beside a few soft toys, but she kept wriggling the glass toward him. She pressed both hands to the lower pane, leaving little prints, like petals, and for the first time since he'd arrived, Rook stood. He didn't bark, didn't scratch, just stepped forward and placed one paw on the first step. He looked at her and waited. I opened the door. He didn't enter, but he sat on the threshold, head lowered, ears twitching with every sound she made. I found an old flannel blanket in the hall closet that still smelled faintly of my husband's aftershave. I folded it twice and laid it down just inside the door. angled so Rook could see both the kitchen and the nursery. He watched me as I did it, didn't move. But when I stepped back, he came in 4 steps, no more. Then he settled on the blanket with a slow, deliberate turn, like he was mapping the room for memories he didn't yet trust. The baby squealed softly and reached again, tiny fingers curling toward the space he'd taken. Rook didn't move, but his gaze softened. That's the only word for it. Softened. I sat beside her, pulled her into my lap, and whispered something neither of them would remember. But the moment, the feeling of that moment, it stayed. Later that afternoon, I found myself folding laundry in the hallway. The door opened just enough for me to listen. No baby monitor this time. I didn't need it. I could hear everything. The quiet hum of the child's breathing, the faint rustle of her hand against the blanket, and the sound so faint, so steady of Rook's tail, tapping the floor in slow intervals, a metronome of peace. It had become our rhythm, her breath, his presence, my watching. It felt almost like a family. But healing doesn't come without memories, and grief doesn't vanish just because it's quiet. That night, while the baby slept, I sat with Rook on the back porch, the baby monitor silent again beside me. Not broken, not malfunctioning, just listening. I traced the scar behind his shoulder with 2 fingers. He didn't pull away. I'd seen it before in the vet's notes, and later when I washed him gently with a warm cloth. A burn mark, old, but deep. Fur never fully grew back. I wondered if he remembered the pain, or just the sound of the fire, the crackle, the scream, the way air bends under smoke. He shifted closer to the step, and I followed his gaze up toward the stars, just beginning to punch through the dusk. I wish I could have saved him too, I whispered, before I could stop myself. The words sat in the air, unshaken, unchallenged. I don't talk about my husband much, not even to myself. But grief, I've learned, recognizes grief. And sometimes, dogs understand better than people. Rook didn't look at me, but he exhaled, slow and heavy. And I knew we were speaking the same language, the one without words. 2 days later, it happened. The baby had begun to crawl, not fully more of a determined scoot, but it was enough. I had turned my back for only a second to rinse a bottle in the sink, and when I looked again, she was gone from the blanket nest. I froze. Then I heard it, not a cry, not a crash, just breathing, low and steady. I peeked around the doorway into the sunroom and saw her pressed gently against Rook's side, her hand tangled in the soft fur beneath his ear. And Rook, he was still, his head low, his body curved protectively around her, as if she had always belonged there, as if she had found a place grief could not follow. I didn't say anything, didn't move. I just stood there, one hand on the wall, holding my breath as they stayed that way for what felt like an entire chapter of my life. Eventually, she dozed off, and Rook, that dog who once wouldn't let me near his shoulder, closed his eyes beside her, a sentinel resting dot, because for the first time, he wasn't the only one watching. That night, I placed the baby in her crib without turning on the monitor. Instead, I left the door slightly ajar, the hallway dimly lit, with the old nightlight shaped like a lamb. Rook lay in the hallway, directly outside her room. He didn't sleep, but he didn't pace either. He waited, like always, only now, not for someone lost, but for someone found. I passed him once around midnight, heading for a glass of water. He lifted his head. I paused. "Stay," I whispered, and he did, not because I told him to, but because the world, for the first time in a long time, had given him a reason. The first real warmth of the season came like a whisper, not an announcement. It arrived quietly, carried on the breath of a late morning breeze that moved the curtains without effort, the kind of breeze that smells of thawed earth and sun-warmed bark, and that makes even the walls of a house feel like they're stretching after a long sleep. I opened the windows that day, all of them, and for the first time in months, the silence Inside wasn't suffocating. It was soft. Rook had moved from the hallway rug to the sun-drenched square just beneath the nursery window. The baby, now fully capable of crawling in gentle zigzags across the floor, had taken to following him one palm slap at a time. It was never loud, never rushed, just the hush of two souls circling each other, discovering, becoming. I had never seen a dog so careful. He moved like he understood her fragility. If she reached toward his ear, he tilted his head. If she leaned against his ribs, he held still. If her tiny hand curled into the loose fur at his chest, he breathed slower, as though not to startle her with the rise and fall. There were no barks, no licks, just presence, and it was enough. I took just one photo. I didn't post. It didn't send it to anyone. It was for me. The baby had fallen asleep in the patch of light beside the door. Her cheek rested against Rook's leg, fingers still tangled in his fur. And Rook was looking straight into the lens, not with curiosity. With awareness. It felt like he knew I was capturing something sacred, and maybe he did. In the evenings I began to read again. Just for a few minutes, a chapter here, a page there. I would curl into the armchair in the corner of the living room, a tea gone cold on the side table, and let my eyes fall into the rhythm of words that weren't about parenting, or grief, or fixing things. Stories, soft ones. The baby would fall asleep quickly now. No more midnight stirrings. No more startled cries. And Rook, he'd wait by the crib until her breath evened out, then make his way to the living room, lying just beneath my chair. We didn't speak. Of course not. But I talked to him sometimes, anyway. Quiet things, about the old house I used to live in before marriage. About the tree I'd always meant to plant. About the sweater I found in the attic that still smelled like my husband's cologne. I talked, and Rook listened. The kind of listening that didn't interrupt, didn't offer answers, just made room. It was around this time the neighbors started noticing. At first, just passing comments, a wave across the driveway, a polite "he's a beautiful dog" from the woman across the street, then questions. The kind that come wrapped in compliments but carry their own weight. Is he yours now? How long do you plan to keep him? You should put a tag on him, just in case. I nodded politely, said I wasn't sure, said he was chipped, but I hadn't registered him under my name yet. Truth was, I didn't know if I could or if I should. He still had someone else's name written in his bones, and I still wasn't sure if this home, this quiet cradle of healing, was a pause or a destination for him. Rook didn't seem to ask for permanence, just proximity, just her. One morning after feeding the baby, I found her by the door again, little hands pressed to the glass, waiting. Rook was there, as always, but this time, something was different. He was standing, staring out toward the road, alert, but not tense, still, but not asleep. I moved closer and followed his gaze. A man was walking up the sidewalk, older, jacket zipped halfway, a cap pulled low. He didn't knock, just paused at the edge of the yard and waited, hands tucked in his pockets like he was debating whether to step forward or turn back. Rook didn't move, didn't bark, but his tail stilled. I stepped out quietly, leaving the door slightly ajar. The baby remained inside, watching from her soft perch at the window. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice instinctively soft. The man looked up. His eyes were pale, not just in color, but in feeling. The kind of pale that comes from staring at loss. Too long, I heard a dog was found, a shepherd. Large, black markings, scar on the hind leg. My throat tightened. "You knew him?" He nodded once. "My daughter's Leah. I was the one who took him in after she passed. But he didn't stay." I said nothing. The truth sat between us like a stone. "I just wanted to see him again," he added, glancing toward Rook, not to take him. "Just see." I turned, slightly enough to look back. Rook hadn't moved, but his eyes were different now. Watchful, yes, but gentler. No signs of resistance. no signs of regret. "Come in," I said finally. The man followed me up the porch steps, and when we entered, Rook rose. He didn't bark, didn't whimper. He simply stood, nose lifted faintly, and looked the man in the eyes. The man knelt. "I thought you were gone for good," he whispered, voice cracking. Rook leaned forward, not fully, not all at once, but just enough to press his forehead lightly against the man's chest. Not for long, just a moment. Then he stepped back and returned to his place beneath the window. Not toward the door, not toward the past, but toward her. The man looked at me, his eyes wet but clear. "He's found someone new," I nodded, heart pounding with something too big for language. "He has," I said softly, "and she found him." The man didn't stay long, just long enough to leave something in my hand, a faded photograph of Leah, with Rook beside her, both of them younger, laughing in some backyard I'd never known. "She trained him herself," he said before leaving. "She always said he wasn't meant to be a pet, said he was meant to watch, and then he was gone." That night I pinned the photo to the corner of the fridge, not for Rook, not for me, for the baby one day, so she'd know this wasn't just a story about a dog who showed up one day and stayed. This was about a promise passed between hands, and a bond deeper than names or ownership. When I tucked her in that night, she didn't look at me. She looked toward the doorway and smiled. Rook stood there, just beyond the nightlight's glow, still and waiting, and for the first time, she reached both hands upward so as not to be lifted, not to be held, just to say, in her way, "You're mine." And maybe that was enough. Maybe that had always been the point. By the time the daffodils pushed up through the mulch under the oak tree, Rook had begun to change. Not in a way most people would notice, but I did. It was in the way he moved now, a little less tentative, a little more certain. His steps still held the weight of memory, but there was a groundedness in them, like his feet finally knew where they stood. Sometimes I'd find him waiting beside the crib before I even picked the baby up. Other times he'd lie near the high chair, eyes fixed on her every move, tail thumping whenever she made that squeaky giggle that only he could draw out of her. She had learned to say "bah" now, just once or twice, mostly in the mornings, but when she said it while looking at him, he always came closer. Not because he understood the sound, because he recognized the attention. That was how they spoke now, in gestures, in presence. The baby didn't have words yet, and Rook didn't need them, but somehow they kept finding each other in every silence. It had been 2 months since he arrived, no longer a visitor, not yet a possession, just part of the day, part of the fabric. And that was when I decided it was time. We were going to take a walk. The leash had been an afterthought, an old one I found in the back of the pantry, with a faded brass clip and a fraying end. It smelled like mildew and dust, but it was strong, familiar. I held it in my hand for a long time before I showed it to him. He didn't flinch, didn't step away, just watched me. I knelt, clipped it gently to the new collar I'd bought him, simple brown leather, untagged, quiet. He lowered his head and let me fasten it, not like a surrender, like a trust. I strapped the baby into her carrier and wrapped my coat around both of us. The air still had its edge, but the wind was soft, threading through the trees like a lullaby. Rook waited by the door. When I opened it, he stepped out first, but slowly, checking each step, glancing back to make sure we followed. He didn't pull. He didn't lead. He walked with us around the block. The neighborhood felt quieter than I remembered. Maybe it had always been this way, I just hadn't noticed. Or maybe I had been too loud inside myself to hear it. Rook kept to my left, his head level with the stroller's edge. Every few steps, the baby would lean forward slightly, peering at him with sleepy, blinking eyes. Her fingers twitched under the blanket dot, and every time she moved, Rook's ears flicked, as if he was listening for more than sound. as if he was listening to her at the corner. We passed the school. The playground was empty, the swings still, the sandbox untouched. The kind of stillness only Sunday mornings seemed to hold. Rook paused, not long, just enough to take something in, a scent, a memory, a feeling. Then he kept walking. Back home, I unlatched the gate and let him step through first. He did, slowly, and when I unclipped the leash, he didn't bolt or wander. He simply walked to the porch and sat facing the door. The yard, the street, watching, but not for escape, for return, that night. After the baby had been fed and bathed and bundled into sleep, I sat on the back steps with Rook again. The sky above us was a violet-gray quilt, stitched with stars and the soft haze of distant clouds. I had started keeping a candle on the table beside me, unscented. Plain white, just enough to give the dark a pulse. Rook sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched, and I spoke. I still think of him, every day. The words weren't sudden. They'd been building for weeks. I still wonder if I did enough. If I missed something. If maybe the silence in the end was my fault? Rook didn't respond, but his breathing deepened. I kept going. She wasn't supposed to remember him. Too young. But sometimes, she looks at the window the same way I used to. Like she's waiting for someone who forgot how to come home. A pause. The candle flickered. But you remember, don't you? Rook turned his head, not fully, not dramatically. Just enough that I felt the weight of his presence shift toward me. I took a breath, then another, and the ache in my chest. The one I'd carried through every night feed, every buried grief. Every photo I didn't frame eased, not because it was gone, but because I wasn't the only one holding it anymore. The next day, I found Rook curled in a way I hadn't seen before. Not by the window, not by the door, but beside the crib, inside the room. I had left it open a crack after the morning nap, just enough for air, and he had entered without sound. The baby was awake, one hand reaching through the bars, her palm grazing the thick fur along his spine. He didn't move, didn't react. He just let her hold him like it was the most natural thing in the world. That evening I moved the baby monitor for the last time, from the nightstand to the bookshelf. It still worked, still glowed faintly in the dark, but I didn't need it anymore. Rook had taken its place, not as a device, but as a witness, a presence that didn't just observe, but I understood. Later that week, something small happened. I was folding laundry in the living room, and the baby was lying on her back near the window, babbling softly to herself. Rook lay nearby, head down, eyes half closed, and then she reached toward him, not just casually, not in passing but with intent. She sat up, scooted forward, and leaned her forehead to his. It was clumsy, beautiful, whole, and in that single motion, I saw the moment she claimed him, not as a toy, not as a pet, but as part of her, the kind of part that lives in muscle memory, that wraps around a person before they ever learn how to say why. Rook blinked once, then closed his eyes, and stayed, right there. Like nothing else in the world mattered more than her breath, her warmth, and the trust she had just given him. I watched, from across the room, laundry half folded in my hands, and I whispered only to myself this time, she remembers. I don't know who I meant, but maybe that's what made it true. Some moments arrive without ceremony. They don't knock, they don't ask, they just begin quietly, as if they've always been there, waiting for us to catch up. That's how it was with the mailman. He was younger than the old fellow who used to wave from the sidewalk, and wear the same navy cap year-round. This one walked faster, kept his earbuds in, never looked up unless he had to. But that day, he paused. Rook had been sitting on the front steps, his usual position by now half guard, half ritual, while the baby played just inside the screen door. The mailman stepped up the walk, a small stack of envelopes in hand. Nothing urgent, just paper and routine. Then he saw them, her hand against the mesh, his head tilted toward her. Their stillness, their silence, and he stopped just for a second, but long enough to notice, long enough to see something even he couldn't name. He didn't speak, just laid the mail down gently on the porch rail, nodding once before turning back toward the street. As he walked away, I caught the flick of his head and a glance back over his shoulder. Not curious, not suspicious, just thoughtful. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until Rook turned his head toward me, and in his eyes, I saw it again, that question I never quite had the words for. How long can peace stay untouched? That afternoon, I took the baby to the park for the first time. It wasn't far, just 3 blocks, tucked behind the old post office and shaded by 2 sprawling sycamores. I had packed light, a small blanket, 2 rice crackers, and a bottle of water. Nothing fancy, just something to break the routine without breaking the rhythm we'd found. I left Rook behind. I thought maybe he needed the rest. Or maybe I needed to know who she was without him, even just for an hour. She toddled in uneven lines across the grass, fascinated by ants, shadows, and the corner of the bench. Her world had always been small, but with him in it, it had felt even more enclosed, in a good way. Safe now, without him. The air felt thinner, not dangerous, just less whole. We didn't stay long, maybe 40 minutes, when we came back. The screen door was ajar. My heart stuttered, not from fear, but from knowing. Rook stood just inside the entryway, eyes fixed on the road, waiting, watching. The baby reached her arms out, before I could even unstrap her from the carrier. A squeal left her lips sharp, joyful, almost a call. He didn't run to her, but he stepped forward, and met her there. She buried her face into the side of his neck, like it was instinct, and I understood. We were no longer separate beings trying to heal beside each other. We were in one rhythm now. Even an hour apart made the house feel wrong. That night, something strange happened. Rook didn't stay in his usual spot outside her crib. Instead, he walked the hallway, pacing once slowly, then curled at the far end, just beyond the glow of the nightlight. I stood in the shadows, watching, waiting, but he didn't move, didn't look back, and for the first time in weeks, I heard a sound come from him, a low exhale, not a growl, not pain, just breathe, labored, not sharp, like something heavy had settled back on his chest. I knelt, slowly, placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't flinch, but he didn't lean in, either. He was thinking. I could feel it. Some memory, maybe. Some echo of where he'd been before us. The fire, the silence, afterward. The woman whose name I had spoken once, but who lived in his bones like a second heartbeat. "Are you all right?" I whispered. He didn't move, but his ear flicked, and I knew the answer wasn't yes or no. It was not yet. The next morning, he was back, in the crib, still, calm, watching her breathe. But something had changed, a restlessness beneath the surface. I made eggs and toast, and sat by the window, phone in hand, looking up Leah Camden's name again. Nothing new, just the same obituary, the same brief line about animals, the same quiet. But I scrolled further this time, past the search engine results, and deeper into the local message boards, the archived neighborhood posts, and then I found it. A photo, not of her, but of him, Rook sitting by a garden bed, his fur darker than, his build leaner, a baby goat beside him, a child, not Leah, laughing in the background, and a caption, "Rook keeping watch again. He never lets anything wander too far." The date was almost 4 years ago, and suddenly I saw him differently. Not just a survivor, but a pattern, a soul who had always been tethered to protection, not guarding in the way of fences or alarms, but in the quiet way only some dogs know how to be present, to make their stillness into a shield. That evening, I brought the photo up on my phone and sat beside him on the porch. He glanced at it once, then turned away. But his tail moved, once like he'd seen a ghost he didn't fear, just one he no longer chased. I set the phone down on the step and leaned back beside him. "I think she'd be proud," I said softly. He didn't answer, but from inside the house, the baby laughed, a small, sudden sound, high and round, echoing into the dusk. Rook's head lifted instantly, his ears twitched, then he stood and walked to the door. Later, I found the photo still glowing on the phone screen, battery low, the image fading as the light dimmed. I picked it up and whispered her name, Leah, not as a question, not as a call, but as a promise. She had passed him forward, and now he was becoming something new. I tucked the phone away, turned off the porch light, and stepped inside. Rook was already curled at the foot of the crib. The baby's fingers rested on his paw, even in sleep, and I smiled, not with joy, exactly, but with peace, the kind that comes when you realize some good things don't need to be explained, they just need to be held, quietly, lived gently, and protected in whatever form they arrive. It came folded in thirds, plain white envelope, no handwriting, no stamp, just a barcode, a typewritten label, and a date. It arrived tucked between a grocery coupon flyer and a catalog I hadn't subscribed to in years. I didn't open it right away. I knew what it was, even before I looked closely, even before I saw the name at the top. County Animal Services, Lost or Stray Canine Record Follow-up, and just below that, the name I'd whispered to the stars only weeks ago, Rook. I let the envelope sit on the counter for the better part of an hour. Rook was lying in the kitchen doorway, one eye watching the baby as she gummed a rubber spoon on the tiled floor. The sun caught his fur in soft waves. He looked so much like home now, not just a guest, but I knew better. Paper changes things, especially when it comes with a file number. When I opened it, the language was clinical. This letter serves as notification that an unclaimed German Shepherd, scanned with ID chip ###, has been recorded in our system for more than 90 days, without final transfer of ownership. Please confirm or deny permanent placement. Failure to respond may result in reassignment, seizure, or closure of the stray file. Seizure. That word sat wrong in my throat, like a threat that didn't belong in our home, like something trying to rewrite a story that had already found its ending. I folded the letter slowly, once again into thirds. Then I stared out the window at Rook, at the baby, at the quiet between them. She had started humming now, just softly, no real tune, and Rook, without being called, rose, walked to her, and rested, his chin on her leg. The letter trembled in my hands, not because I was afraid, but because I knew what it meant. Someone, somewhere, still saw him as a case, not as hers, not as ours. I called the shelter the next day. I waited until the baby was napping and Rook was asleep near the laundry basket, his paws twitching in some deep, silent dream. The phone rang 4 times. Then a voice answered efficiently, tired. "This is County Animal Services, Intake Department." I gave them the number on the letter, and then, after a pause I hadn't planned, I added softly, "His name is Rook." There was a long silence. Then, papers shuffled. Rook. Yes, listed originally under Leah Camden's ID. You're calling on behalf of the follow-up. I am, I said, more firmly now. I've had him. He came to me months ago. I didn't know there was still an open file. She cleared her throat. If he's unclaimed, but still chipped under the prior owner, we need documentation to close the record or update it. Otherwise, technically, he's not your dog yet. Technically, that word again. That cold space where real love doesn't count. I'd like to transfer him, I said, and then, because it felt wrong not to say it, but I didn't adopt him. He chose us. Another pause. Less paperwork this time. More human. I'll send you the form, she said. You'll need a witness signature. If there was no official surrender, you'll have to write a statement. Just explain how he got to you, how he got to me. I almost laughed. How do you explain something like that? How do you explain a dog arriving like a prayer? How do you document grief, recognizing grief? That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the form open in front of me. I didn't fill it out, not yet. Instead, I watched them from the hallway. The baby was lying in her crib, drowsy. One hand curled loosely around the corner of the blanket. Rook lay beside the crib, still guarded, whole. And I thought to myself, we've already signed something stronger than paper. The next day, the mailman knocked. That was new. He usually dropped the mail quietly and walked off. But this time, he tapped the screen door twice, then waited. I opened it, and he held out a small envelope. No postage, he said. Someone must have dropped it at the depot. It was addressed to you. He hesitated, then added, it's handwritten. I took it and thanked him. He nodded toward the baby, who was watching us from her mat. She's always got that dog nearby, doesn't she? She does. He smiled, almost wistfully. It's like they've got a secret. I didn't reply, because they did. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of folded paper, and the handwriting I recognized immediately. It matched the script from the old photo I'd found online weeks ago. Curved, elegant, confidence. Leah Camden's father, the man who had visited once, then disappeared without ceremony. The note was brief. I thought about coming back, about asking for him. But I realized that would be for me, not for him. If he's stayed this long, he's made his choice. Thank you for letting him be what he was always meant to be. No need to write back. Just hold on to him, and let him hold on to you. I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time. Rook padded into the room, looked at me, then at the paper. I folded it gently and placed it beside the shelter's form, and then I picked up a pen. Not because I had to, because I wanted the world to catch up to what we already knew. That he was hers, that he was ours, that he had come home. The next morning, I signed the form, added my name, my address, a short statement, no embellishments, just a sentence. He arrived without sound, but with purpose. He has watched over her since the day he chose us. He is no longer lost. I left the witness line blank, and I think that was all right. Some truths don't need signatures. They just need to be lived. That night, after the house had gone still, and the baby had drifted into whatever dreams babies have, dreams of light, warmth, and fur, I opened the back door one last time. Rook followed me out. We sat together on the steps, side by side. The stars were out again, full, sharp, humming with distance. I leaned my head against his shoulder and whispered, "No, one's taking you from her." He didn't respond, but he didn't need to. He was already keeping his promise that started with a cough, just a small one, dry, short, barely more than a breath, caught sideways in her throat. But when you're a mother, your body becomes a radar for small changes, and this one rang loud. She wasn't sick, not really. No fever, no rash, just different, less laughter, more stillness, a weight in her limbs. Even Rook noticed it before I said a word. That morning, she'd curled into his side earlier than usual. Not playful, not restless. Just folded into him like she was returning to something she already missed. He stayed with her all day. Didn't leave her side. Didn't eat until she napped. Didn't blink when I walked by with the thermometer. He just watched, like he knew. Like he felt it first, by evening. I had an appointment scheduled at the clinic, 2 towns over. Our regular pediatrician was out on leave, and the substitute had no open slots. But the woman on the phone heard the hesitation in my voice and said she'd make space if I could come in before 8 a.m. The next morning, I buckled her into the car seat, with layers of blankets. One of her socks clutched in her fist, and a teething ring tucked against her chest. Rook stood by the car door. He didn't try to jump in, he just watched. Heard Dot watch me. And for the first time in a long time, I saw it. The slight tremble in his back leg. Not pain. No injury. Fear. A memory he couldn't place. Some other morning. Some other cars. Some other human he'd watched disappear through a windshield, and maybe not return. I reached down, cupped his muzzle. "I'm coming back," I whispered. He didn't. Blink didn't move, but he sat down slowly, firmly in front of the driveway gate, like a sentry, and waited. The clinic waiting room smelled like old coffee and lemon disinfectant. Too many chairs, too much silence. I held her close, her head against my chest, her breath warm but thin. The nurse glanced at us with quick sympathy, then handed over the clipboard. "Just check what's changed," she said. "You're already in the system." I sat near the window, filling in the date, her weight, the medications she wasn't on, and then my pen hesitated at the line that asked for household members. I wanted to write Rook, not just because he was there, because he mattered, because he counted, but I left it blank. Instead, I drew a small star in the corner of the page. My silent way of saying, there is more to our story than you can ask in a form. The doctor was kind. She checked vitals, tapped gently at the baby's chest, pressed a stethoscope to her back with practiced hands. "She's not sick," she said finally. "Just tired. Could be a growth spurt. Could be emotional." "Emotional," I repeated. She nodded. "Kids this age absorb everything. Stress, change, the energy in a room. Even things we think they don't notice." I thought about the letter from the shelter, the phone call, the decision I'd made. The form now filed, the claim now formalized. Had she felt that too? The weight of uncertainty. Did she sense, somehow, the tension that even Rook couldn't shield her from? The doctor placed a hand on my shoulder. "Trust her," she said. "She's holding something, but she's not letting it break her." On the way home, the sky hung heavy, a velvet gray, bruised with storm. The roads were empty. The houses still. The kind of morning that feels more like a dusk. I turned onto our street slowly, fingers tight around the wheel, and that's when I saw him. Rook still sitting, exactly where I left him. His back was damp from the dew, but his posture hadn't shifted. Still tall, still steady, still waiting. The moment the car pulled into the drive, he stood, took 2 steps forward, and then stopped. I unbuckled the baby, lifted her into my arms. She was half asleep, her body warm and heavy against mine. Rook approached slowly. Then, without a sound, he lowered his head and pressed it gently to her knee. She stirred, and in the smallest movement, no louder than a breath, her fingers reached toward his ear, not to play, to hold. Inside, the rain began, not heavy, not violent, just soft like a memory on the roof. I let it fall. No TV, no music, no music, just the 3 of us curled into the quiet. She is in my lap, Rook by her feet, me, listening to the echo of something I couldn't quite name. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked out through the crack in her doorway. Rook was at his post, again, but not sleeping, not resting, guarding. Something was returning to him, a weight in his bones, a shift in his silence, not pain, not illness, a warning, as if he knew that the peace we'd built was more fragile than it looked, and that something, or someone might try to test it. I checked the mail the next day, among the flyers and junk. There was a return envelope from the shelter, a receipt, an official transfer record, a certificate, permanent placement confirmed, Rook's name, my name, a single line typed at the bottom, guardian of record acknowledged. I ran my thumb across those words, guardian. It didn't feel like the right title. I wasn't the guardian he was. I was the one being protected. That evening, I lit the candle again, the white one, the one that meant reflection, not ritual. I sat by the window while she slept, and Rook curled against the crib. Outside, the wind shifted low and distant, carrying with it the scent of something unfinished. Maybe a storm. Maybe a past we hadn't finished living through. And I whispered into the dark, "Don't leave." Not because I feared he would, but because I feared he thought he had to. Because somewhere in his memory, loyalty had meant goodbye. And I needed him to know not this time. I don't know how long I sat like that, but at some point, I felt it. A warmth by my knee. Rook's eyes lifted, soft and steady, and in them was no uncertainty, no hint of departure, just that familiar, sacred stillness, the one that had been there from the beginning, from the night. He waited by the monitor, to the day she reached for him through glass, to now, to us. It began, as many quiet things do, with the sound of her feet, just 2 steps, soft, unsteady, but undeniably hers. She had been trying for weeks, pulling herself upright, wobbling near the edges of furniture, falling into cushions with surprised laughter. But this morning was different. This morning, she stood in the middle of the nursery, no hand to brace her, and she walked 2 small steps, 1 breathless pause. And then she collapsed into Rook's side. He didn't flinch, didn't move, just turned his head slowly and looked at her. Their eyes met, and she laughed, the kind of laugh that doesn't ask permission, the kind that bubbles up from something deeper than the lungs. Rook's tail swept once across the rug, and for the first time, I saw what becoming whole looked like, not as a grand event, but as a simple morning. A milestone witnessed not in public, not with applause, but by the one who never looked away. Later that day, I called the carpenter. His name was Eli, a friend of my husband's, quiet man, slow with words, but fast with kindness. He answered on the second ring. "I need a gate," I said. "Not one for keeping things out, one for showing they belong." He didn't ask for details, didn't laugh at the phrasing. He just said, "I'll be there in 2 days." And he was. Eli arrived early Thursday morning, a soft chill still holding on to the edges of the yard. Rook met him at the fence line, didn't growl, didn't bark, just stood still, eyes fixed on the man's tool belt, as if to say, "I'll allow it, but you better get it right." Eli knelt, extended a hand. Rook sniffed it once, then turned away, back to his place by the steps. I told Eli what I wanted, a small fence, waist high surrounding the back porch, a swinging gate that could close with one hand, nothing too tight, nothing that would feel like a boundary, just enough to make a line that said, "This is home, and he belongs inside it." Eli listened, then nodded. "No problem," he said. "I'll stain it to match the door." While he worked, the baby watched from the window, palms against the glass. Rook lay beside her, head tilted slightly, ears flicking at each knock of the hammer. It felt like a ceremony, a quiet one, the building of something permanent, something Rook didn't ask for, but deserved all the same. By evening it was done. Eli didn't stay for tea, just wiped his hands on a rag, tipped his cap toward the baby, and said, "He's got good instincts, that one." I nodded, throat tight. He knows where he belongs. And then Eli was gone, his truck rumbling off into the soft dusk. I stood at the new gate, hands on the latch, and watched Rook sniff each post carefully, as if memorizing their shape. Then he turned and walked to the center of the porch, and lay down in the space he'd always chosen. Only now, it had a border, a frame, like his presence had been named. That night, something changed in me. Maybe it was the sight of her taking steps toward him. Maybe it was the click of the gate closing behind us. Maybe it was knowing that, for the first time in a long time, nothing needed to be fought for. Not her safety, not his place, not my right to keep them both close. I sat by the monitor after she'd gone to sleep, held it in my hand, listened to the quiet static. No breathing, no cries, just that low hum, familiar, steady. I thought of the first night. The rain, the silence, the shape curled beside this very device, and I whispered, "You're not watching anymore. You're home." The next morning, I left the gate open, not by accident, by invitation. Rook stepped down the steps slowly, tail high, shoulders loose. He walked. The yard, like it belonged to him, marked the edges, sniffed the corners, rolled once in a patch of sun-warmed clover, then returned not out of duty, out of choice. He curled beneath her high chair and closed his eyes as she dropped cereal puffs near his paws. She giggled each time he ignored them. It became a game, a new one only they played. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, a woman stood on the porch, mid-50s wool coat, a clipboard in her hand. "Ms. Camden?" she asked gently. I froze, then nodded. That was her. "Leah, but I'm not to." "No, I know," the woman said quickly. "I'm with the local shelter board. We're following up on legacy placements. Dogs from former homes that were never formally claimed, but remained in family custody. You filed the transfer." "I did." She smiled, a soft, real one. "I'm just here to verify that all's well." That Rook adjusted. I stepped aside. Rook was lying in the middle of the rug, one paw curled beneath him, the baby standing beside him, her tiny hand resting on his back. Not for balance, just because it made sense to touch him. The woman's eyes misted. "I think that answers my question." We sat on the porch while she filled out a final form. Rook lay behind us, dozing. The baby slept in her stroller, and the wind moved through the trees, like a lullaby made of leaves. The woman paused before she left. "You know," she said, "it's not often we see dogs choose like this." I looked at her. "Choose?" She nodded. "Some animals stay wherever they're fed, but the rare ones find their person, their purpose, and once they do, nothing will make them leave." I glanced back at the baby, her hand still curled into his fur. "He's always been watching," I said, and now she whispered, "He doesn't have to." That night, after the house was still, I wrote a letter, not to anyone, just to her. To the little girl who had changed everything without speaking a word, to the child who gave a broken dog a reason to trust again. I tucked it into an envelope and placed it in the box beneath her crib, where I kept the baby, book, the hospital bracelet, and a lock of hair from her first trim. The letter read, "You will never remember the first time he saw you. You will never remember the way you reached for him through glass, but he does. And I hope, one day, you'll understand what that kind of love means, what it means to be chosen, to be watched over, and to return that trust in full." Rook slept at the foot of her crib that night, and this time, I didn't check the monitor. I didn't need to, because I knew he was breathing easy, and so was she, and so was I.